Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. We tell horror stories meant to keep you awake at night. Let's begin. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more horror stories. A Christmas Carol. The bells of London didn't ring with holiday cheer on this January 13, 2026. They tolled with a heavy, leaden finality that seemed to vibrate the very frost off the window panes of Elias Scrooge's penthouse. The world had changed since the days of Dickens, but the rot in the human soul remained a constant. Elias sat alone, surrounded by the cold glow of multiple monitors displaying the plummeting stocks of his rivals. He had spent the last decade turning the season of giving into a season of calculated acquisition. To Elias, the spirits people spoke of were merely chemical imbalances or marketing ploys, until the night the digital security on his vault door began to scream. It wasn't a siren, it was a human voice synthesized through 1,000 speakers, chanting a name Elias hadn't heard in 7 years: Marley. The lights in the penthouse flickered and died, replaced by a sickly ultraviolet hue. From the center of his glass desk, a figure began to manifest. It wasn't wrapped in iron chains, but in miles of glowing fiber-optic cables and heavy rusted server racks that dragged behind it with a sound like grinding teeth. Elias, the specter rasped, its jaw unhinged and hanging by a single silver wire. It was Jacob Marley, but his eyes were now 2 flickering LED screens displaying a scrolling ticker of his eternal debts. The ledger is full, and the collection agency has arrived. Elias tried to stand, but his legs felt like they were made of cooling wax. It's a hallucination, a deep fake, a hack. The hack is in your heart, Elias, Marley's voice echoed, vibrating the liquid in Scrooge's glass. Tonight you will be audited. 3 entities will visit you. They are not ghosts of the past, but the ghosts of what you have replaced. The first spirit arrived as the clock struck 1. It wasn't a candle-like child, but a flickering holographic projection of Elias as a boy, trapped inside a shattered VR headset. It didn't show him memories of his youth. It showed him the moments he had traded for profit, the funerals he missed, the hands he never held, the warmth he had calculated into a loss. "Look at the data," the spirit of the past whispered, its voice a distorted glitch. "See the empty space where your life was supposed to be." The second spirit, the ghost of the present, was a towering mass of industrial waste and discarded plastic, crowned with a wreath of barbed wire. It showed him the city below, not filled with families at dinner, but with the hollowed-out shells of people working in his automated warehouses, their movements robotic, their eyes vacant. "They are your masterpiece, Elias," the giant boomed, its breath smelling of ozone and burning rubber. By the time the third spirit appeared, Elias was crawling across his marble floor, begging for a system reboot. The ghost of Christmas yet to come didn't wear a hood. It was a void, a literal tear in reality where nothing existed. It showed him a grave, but not one of stone. It was a digital archive, a single line of corrupted code in a vast empty cloud. "No one remembers the ghost in the machine," the silence screamed.
Elias reached out to touch the void, and as his fingers met the emptiness, he felt his own pulse begin to synchronize with the ticking of the city's clocks. He wasn't being shown a future, he was being deleted. I am the hollow echo in the boardroom now, a ghost trapped in the algorithms of greed, waiting for the next billionaire to believe that he can own the time he is destined to lose.
An inquiry into love and death. The manor of Blackthorn stood at the edge of the moor like a thought unfinished, ancient, brooding, and unwilling to be forgotten. Dr. Elias Harrow arrived on a night when the moon was thin and pale, its light pouring through the clouds like diluted silver. He had come not as a thrill-seeker, but as a scholar. Love and death were his lifelong subjects, and Blackthorn was said to be where they had intertwined most tragically. Years earlier, the manor's last master, Sir Alastair Whitcomb, had vanished on the same night his wife, Eleanor, was found lifeless in the Great Hall. No wound was ever discovered, only a faint blood stain on the stone floor that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Rumors claimed Sir Alastair still wandered the halls, bound by grief rather than malice. Elias did not believe in ghosts. He believed in memory, guilt, and the way the human mind refused to loosen its grip on love, even beyond death. Inside, the air was cold and stale, perfumed faintly with dust and extinguished candles. Torn tapestries clung to the walls like old wounds. As Elias stepped into the grand hallway, moonlight streamed through the tall arched windows, illuminating the infamous stain upon the floor. It was faint now, almost gentle, like a shadow of violence rather than violence itself. "You see," Elias murmured into his journal, "even blood learns to fade." A soft sound answered him, not a voice, but the quiet drag of metal. He looked up. A figure stood near the far wall, half-formed, translucent, a man in Victorian dress, chains hanging loosely from his wrists. His face was pale and tired, not monstrous, but deeply human. Elias felt no fear, only a tightening in his chest. "You are Sir Alastair," he said quietly. The ghost inclined his head as though exhausted by the effort of acknowledgement. "I did not come to banish you," Elias said. "I came to understand." The ghost's eyes, dim, blue-gray like moonlit fog, lifted to the bloodstain. "She loved me," Sir Alastair said at last, his voice brittle as frost, "and I loved her. That was the beginning of the end." Elias listened. Eleanor had been ill, not of the body, but of the spirit. She feared death with a terror that consumed her waking hours. Sir Alastair, desperate to save her, sought forbidden texts and whispered rituals, methods promising to bind love beyond mortality. "I wanted eternity for us," the ghost said. "I did not ask what it would cost." On the final night, Eleanor collapsed in the hall as the ritual unraveled. There was no murder, no blade, no poison, only the unbearable shock of a promise broken. She died in his arms, not screaming, but weeping. When Elias asked why Sir Alastair had vanished, the ghost lifted his chains. "Because I chose to stay." Death came for Sir Alastair soon after, but he refused it. Love anchored him to the world, and guilt sealed the chain. He did not haunt the manor out of rage, but devotion, an eternal vigil beside the place where love failed to defeat death. Elias closed his journal. "Love does not conquer death," he said gently, "but it gives death meaning."
The ghost studied him. Slowly, the chains loosened, dissolving into mist. The bloodstain dimmed, fading further than it ever had before. "I think she would forgive me," Sir Alistair whispered. Moonlight brightened, and the figure thinned until only the echo of sorrow remained. When Elias left Blackthorn Manor at dawn, the hall was empty, and the stone floor was clean at last. His inquiry was complete.
The bloodstain appeared before dawn. It bloomed slowly on the stone floor of Canterville Hall's long gallery, dark, old, and unmistakably human. No one was surprised when it returned. The house had worn that stain for centuries, despite scrubbing, prayers, and renovations. What surprised everyone was the ghost's fear. Sir Simon de Canterville had haunted the estate for over 300 years. He rattled chains, moaned through corridors, and appeared at midnight dressed in the clothes of his execution. He knew every trick, he knew every scream, until the Otis family moved in. They laughed at the bloodstain, they scrubbed it clean with detergent, and when Sir Simon appeared that first night, glowing eyes, clanking chains, voice echoing with practiced menace, Mr. Otis simply offered him lubricating oil for the noise. Sir Simon retreated, humiliated. Night after night he tried again. He moaned, they snored. He rattled chains, they complained. He manifested as the Black Spectre of Canterville Chase. The twins threw pillows at him. For the first time in centuries, Sir Simon felt something new, useless. The bloodstain returned daily, but it changed, sometimes crimson, sometimes green, sometimes fading entirely. Sir Simon no longer controlled it. The house itself seemed restless, sighing through its walls. Only Virginia noticed. She saw Sir Simon not as a monster, but as a tired thing, faded, hunched, more shadow than soul. One evening, she found him sitting in a forgotten alcove, his glow weak, his chains silent. "Why do you stay?" she asked softly. Sir Simon looked at her, surprised by kindness. "I cannot sleep. I killed my wife here. The house remembers, and so do I." Virginia felt the chill deepen. Sir Simon explained the curse, until a pure heart prayed for him and walked with him through the darkness. He would remain bound, haunting, fading, unable to pass on. The family never noticed when Virginia disappeared that night. The secret passage opened silently behind the tapestry, swallowing her candlelight. Sir Simon led her through corridors that had not existed for centuries, walls breathing, portraits whispering, stones slick with time. They reached the Garden of Death, hidden beyond the house. It was not peaceful. Shadows clung to twisted trees, statues wept black tears. The air pulsed with regret so thick it made Virginia's chest ache. "This is where I wait," Sir Simon said, "every night." Virginia knelt. She prayed. The garden trembled, the statues cracked. Sir Simon's chains fell away, dissolving into dust. For the first time, his face looked human, tired, relieved, almost gentle. "Thank you," he whispered. The ground opened. Sir Simon vanished into the light beneath the earth. When Virginia returned, the bloodstain was gone, forever. Weeks later, the family found a hidden room behind the west wall. Inside lay Sir Simon's bones wrapped in velvet, untouched by time. Virginia buried him beneath an old almond tree. The tree bloomed the next morning. At night, Canterville Hall is quiet now, but sometimes, just before dawn, the house sighs.
as if remembering.
The shadow appeared on a Tuesday night. Daniel noticed it while brushing his teeth, an extra darkness stretching across the bathroom wall, longer than it should have been, bending at an impossible angle. He froze, toothbrush hanging uselessly from his mouth, and slowly turned. Nothing stood behind him. The bathroom light buzzed softly overhead. His reflection stared back, pale and tired, but normal. Daniel laughed nervously and told himself it was just fatigue. He worked late. Shadows played tricks when you were exhausted. He turned back to the sink. The shadow moved. It slid, slow and deliberate, away from the wall and pooled near the floor like spilled ink. Daniel dropped the toothbrush. The shadow didn't belong to anything. It wasn't connected to his feet, the sink, or the doorframe. It existed independently, darker than darkness, absorbing the light around it. Then it stopped. Daniel backed out of the bathroom and flicked on every light in the apartment. The shadow was gone. That night, he barely slept. The next evening, it returned, this time in the living room. Daniel sat frozen on the couch as the shadow crept along the baseboard, hugging the walls, avoiding the light as if it understood it. His heart hammered as he whispered, "This isn't real." The shadow paused. Then it stretched upward, forming a vague human outline, too tall, too thin, its edges rippling like smoke underwater. A voice echoed inside Daniel's head, not spoken, felt. "You noticed." Daniel screamed and ran. He stayed with a friend for 2 nights, convincing himself the stress had finally broken him. When he returned to his apartment, everything looked normal. No shadows out of place, no movement. Relief settled until sunset. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the lights flickered. The shadow poured out from beneath the bedroom door, wider now, thicker, like it had grown while he was gone. It climbed the walls, spreading across the ceiling, blocking the light entirely. Daniel grabbed his phone, dialing emergency services. No signal. The temperature dropped sharply, his breath fogging the air. The shadow detached from the surfaces and stood upright in the center of the room. It was almost human. Almost. Where its face should have been, there was only a deeper void, a hollow that seemed to pull at Daniel's thoughts, memories, fear. "I was born where light was ignored," the voice whispered. "Corners, hallways, the spaces you never look at." Daniel shook his head. "What do you want?" The shadow stepped closer, its edges brushing his skin like cold ash. "To finish forming." Daniel lunged for the lamp and smashed it against the wall. Glass shattered, plunging the room into darkness. He realized too late what he'd done. The shadow surged. It wrapped around him, not crushing, not hurting, merging. Daniel felt it slide into his body, filling spaces he didn't know existed. His thoughts slowed. His heartbeat faded into something distant. He collapsed. Morning light streamed through the windows. Daniel woke on the floor, gasping. Sunlight banished every trace of the shadow. He laughed hysterically, tears streaming down his face. It was over. Or so he thought. Days passed, weeks. Daniel noticed changes. Mirrors reflected him a second too late. His shadow lagged behind his movements. Sometimes when he turned quickly, it faced the wrong direction. At night, he felt taller. He felt stretched, hungry.
One evening, as he passed a dark alley, he saw someone pause, staring at the ground in confusion. Their shadow moved first. Daniel smiled.
The Haunting of Hill House. The iron gates of Hill House didn't just swing open, they yielded with a heavy, rhythmic groan that sounded like a long, dormant lung finally taking a breath of the frigid January air. It was January 13th, 2026, and I was the last of the Crane descendants to set foot on the property. The house sat atop the ridge like a brooding gargoyle, its windows less like glass and more like cataracts over blind, searching eyes. Silence lived there, but it wasn't the absence of sound, it was a deliberate, heavy presence that pressed against your eardrums until you could hear the blood rushing through your own valves. Dr. Montague's theories from decades ago had called it a psychic sponge, but as I stepped into the foyer, I realized the house was much more than a sponge. It was a predator. The architecture was subtly wrong. Angles that should have been 90 degrees were 89. Doorways were slightly off-center, and the floor tilted almost imperceptibly toward the heart of the house, the Red Room. I had come to finish the cleansing my family started, armed with modern thermal sensors and a resolve hardened by years of therapy. But by midnight, the sensors were useless. They didn't show cold spots, they showed heat signatures in the shape of people standing directly behind me, even when I stood against a wall. The pounding began at 1 a.m. It wasn't someone knocking on a door, it was as if a giant were using a sledgehammer against the very foundations of the earth. Boom, boom, boom. It moved from the kitchen, up the spiral staircase, and stopped right outside my door. "Nell?" a voice whispered. It was my mother's voice, sweet and melodic, yet it carried the chill of the grave. "It's time to wake up, dear. The tea is getting cold." I didn't answer. I knew the rule. Don't look at what isn't there. But the door handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately. The wood of the door began to bow inward as if something immense were leaning against it from the other side, trying to melt through the oak. I retreated to the corner of the room, my flashlight beam trembling. The wallpaper, a Victorian floral pattern, began to shift. The vines began to grow, coiling off the walls like green snakes. They didn't reach for me, they reached for the shadows. "Hill House stays," the walls breathed, a composite of everyone who had ever died within its walls, a chorus of 1,000 tragedies. Suddenly, the Red Room door at the end of the hall swung open. A light, warm and inviting, spilled out. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to go to it. It felt like home. It felt like a mother's hug. I found my feet moving without my permission. I wasn't being chased, I was being invited. As I stepped into the Red Room, the tea my mother mentioned was sitting on a small table. But the liquid wasn't tea, it was a swirling, dark ink. I looked at the walls, and the faces of my ancestors were etched into the wood, their mouths opened in silent, eternal screams. The house didn't want my ghost, it wanted my life. It wanted a heartbeat to power its dark, shifting geometry for another century. I felt the floor soften beneath me, turning into a velvet-lined throat. I realized then that the Red Room wasn't a room at all. It was the stomach of the house. The door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed through my soul. I looked at my hands, and they were already fading, becoming part of the ornate woodwork of the ceiling. I am the latest stone in the foundation, a silent tenant in a house that walks alone, waiting for the next guest to wonder why the walls feel so much like skin. The display case in the center of the Fitz agency didn't just hold a relic. It contained a frantic, trapped intelligence that rattled the silver glass jar with a rhythmic, desperate violence every time I entered the room. It was January 13th, 2026, and London was under the grip of a particularly loud winter. The problem, the epidemic of ghosts haunting the city, had grown more aggressive since the new year began. I sat at my desk, the only light coming from the magnesium flares burning in the hallway to keep the creeping shades at bay. But the real danger wasn't in the hall. It was the skull sitting 3 feet away from me. I shouldn't have been able to hear it. Only those with high-level psychic talent, like Lucy Carlyle, were supposed to hear the Type 3 spirits. But tonight, the air was thin, and the skull's voice wasn't coming through my ears. It was vibrating directly into my jawbone, a dry, papery rasp that sounded like dead leaves skittering over a grave. "He's coming for the rest of me, Anthony," the skull whispered. It was the spirit of a long-dead occultist, a man who had traded his soul for knowledge that was now rotting in the dark. The man with the iron cane. He doesn't want the stories, he wants the marrow. I stood up, my hand hovering over my rapier. "Who is coming?" The skull let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it had lungs. "The one who built the foundations of this city on the bones of the unquiet. Look at the shadows, boy. They aren't yours anymore." I looked down. My shadow was no longer attached to my boots. It was stretching toward the skull's jar, its fingers elongating into jagged obsidian claws. The temperature in the room plummeted. The silver glass of the jar began to frost over, not with ice, but with a gray, pulsating mold. A heavy, rhythmic thud echoed from the front door. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't a knock, it was the sound of something heavy being dragged. The iron protections I had placed on the threshold began to hiss and spark, the salt lines turning a scorched, oily black. "You think silver and salt can stop a hunger that has aged for 300 years? The skull hissed, its teeth clicking behind the glass. "Break the jar, Anthony. Give me my teeth, and I might let you die quickly." The door didn't break, it simply ceased to be. In its place stood a towering figure draped in a cloak of shifting smoke, its face a void where features should have been. It held a cane made of human vertebrae, topped with a glowing spectral orb. "The collection is incomplete," the figure boomed, a sound that made the windows of the agency shatter inward. I drew my sword, the silver blade humming with a pale blue light. But as I lunged, the shadows in the room rose up like a tidal wave. They didn't hit me, they flowed into me, filling my mouth and nose with the taste of cold ash. I felt the skull's laughter vibrating in my skull, its consciousness merging with mine. "Finally, a fresh set of eyes," the skull whispered inside my brain. My hands, still gripping the sword, were no longer under my control. They turned the blade toward my own throat. The figure in the doorway tilted its head, the spectral orb on its cane flashing a brilliant, blinding white. "The marrow is ready," it said. "I am the voice in the jar now, a rattling echo in a silver cage, whispering secrets to the next agent who thinks they are strong enough to master the dead." The woman in black. The fog didn't just roll across the Nine Lives Causeway. It rose from the salt marshes like a thick, white shroud, erasing the boundary between the living earth and the treacherous sinking sands of Crythan Gifford.
It was January 13, 2026, and I had been sent to Eelmarsh House to settle the final affairs of the late Alice Drablow. As a junior solicitor, I viewed the rumors of a curse as nothing more than rural superstition, the kind of stories used to keep children away from the dangerous tides. But as the pony and trap pulled away, leaving me alone in that desolate gray stone mansion, the silence felt heavy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The house stood on a small island, cut off from the mainland whenever the tide came in. By mid-afternoon, the water had risen, and I was a prisoner. I began sorting through the mountain of papers in the study, but my concentration was broken by a sound from the nursery upstairs, the rhythmic, hypnotic creak-clack of a rocking chair. I climbed the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pushed open the door to the nursery. The room was perfectly preserved, filled with Victorian toys that looked brand new. The rocking chair was indeed moving, swinging back and forth with a violent energy, yet the room was empty. Then I saw her through the window. She was standing in the overgrown garden, a tall, gaunt figure dressed from toe to head in deep, lusterless black. Her face was a pale, wasted mask of grief and unimaginable malice. She didn't move. She simply stared at the house with eyes that looked like scorched holes in a sheet of ice. "I see you," I whispered, the words freezing in the air. As soon as the words left my lips, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted until the ink in the well on the desk cracked and froze. The woman in black didn't walk toward the house. She simply vanished from the garden and reappeared at the end of the hallway, her black veil fluttering in a wind that didn't exist. Every door in the house began to slam in a violent, synchronized percussion. I ran for the front door, but the marsh had moved inside. The floorboards were slick with salt water, and the smell of decaying seaweed filled my lungs. I heard a child's cry, a thin, wavering wail that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I remembered the legend, whenever she is seen, a child must die. The malice emanating from the figure was so potent, it felt like a physical weight crushing the air out of my chest. She wasn't a ghost seeking peace. She was a vengeful shadow seeking a company of souls. She glided closer, her feet making no sound on the wet wood. As she lifted her veil, I saw the truth of her suffering, a face twisted by the loss of a child claimed by the very marshes that now served as her kingdom. She reached out a gloved hand, and I felt a coldness that transcended death. The house began to scream, the sound of the wind through the eaves turning into a chorus of the drowned. I realized I wasn't just a visitor. The tide wasn't just water, it was time, and it was closing in over my head. I am the shadow seen from the causeway now, a pale face at the nursery window, eternally watching the tides and waiting for the next stranger to bring me the one thing I can never have back.
Wait till Helen comes. The black water of the Harper's Pond didn't just reflect the overgrown ruins of the old church. It seemed to pull the very light from the sky, dragging the pale January sun down into depths that had never known the warmth of a living hand. It was January 13th, 2026, and my family had moved into the converted church on the edge of the woods to find peace. But the peace was a lie. My 7-year-old sister, Heather, had stopped playing with her dolls and started talking to the air in the graveyard that bordered our backyard. She spoke of a friend named Helen, a girl she said lived in the ruins of the house that had burned down across the pond a century ago. Heather began wearing a silver locket she'd found in the tall grass, a tarnished thing that smelled of stagnant water and old smoke.
She told me Helen was lonely. She told me Helen wanted a sister to stay with her forever in the deep, quiet place. I watched from the window as Heather stood at the water's edge, her lips moving in a silent conversation with the ripples. The shadow of a figure, far too tall and thin, seemed to stretch out from the pond to touch her feet. Tonight, the temperature has dropped below 0, but the pond hasn't frozen. It remains a black, pulsing eye in the center of the woods. Heather is gone from her bed. Her footprints in the snow lead straight to the ruins, and a soft, melodic humming is drifting across the water, a song about secrets buried in the mud. "Wait till Helen comes," Heather had whispered to me before she disappeared. "She's coming to take the loneliness away." I ran toward the ruins, the snow crunching like bone beneath my boots. In the center of the charred foundation, Heather stood holding the hand of something I couldn't clearly see, a shape of shifting shadow and mist. "No!" I screamed, lunging for my sister. But the mist was solid. The grip was like iron, and as the presence turned towards me, I felt a chilling sense of dread. The ground beneath us dissolved into a slurry of peat and ancient sorrow. This wasn't about play. It was about pulling the living into a silent, watery grave to balance the scales of a forgotten tragedy. I grabbed Heather's waist, but the locket around her neck began to glow with a sickly, phosphorescent light, an anchor binding her. "She's my friend now," Heather droned, her voice sounding as if it were coming from the bottom of a well. The pond began to overflow, the black water rushing uphill, defying gravity to claim us. I saw movements beneath the surface, fleeting glimpses of other figures, those Helen had befriended over the last 100 years. They weren't just ghosts, they were trapped. With a final desperate tug, the presence pulled. The world went black, cold, and silent. I am the ripple on the surface of the pond now, a silent watcher in the reeds, waiting for the next family to move into the church so I can whisper my sister's name through the floorboards.
The shadow appeared on a Tuesday night. Daniel noticed it while brushing his teeth, an extra darkness stretching across the bathroom wall, longer than it should have been, bending at an impossible angle. He froze, toothbrush hanging uselessly from his mouth, and slowly turned. Nothing stood behind him. The bathroom light buzzed softly overhead. His reflection stared back, pale and tired, but normal. Daniel laughed nervously and told himself it was just fatigue. He worked late. Shadows played tricks when you were exhausted. He turned back to the sink. The shadow moved. It slid, slow and deliberate, away from the wall and pooled near the floor like spilled ink. Daniel dropped the toothbrush. The shadow didn't belong to anything. It wasn't connected to his feet, the sink, or the doorframe. It existed independently, darker than darkness, absorbing the light around it. Then it stopped. Daniel backed out of the bathroom and flicked on every light in the apartment. The shadow was gone. That night, he barely slept. The next evening, it returned, this time in the living room. Daniel sat frozen on the couch as the shadow crept along the baseboard, hugging the walls, avoiding the light as if it understood it. His heart hammered as he whispered, "This isn't real." The shadow paused. Then it stretched upward, forming a vague human outline, too tall, too thin, its edges rippling like smoke underwater. A voice echoed inside Daniel's head, not spoken, felt. "You noticed." Daniel screamed and ran.
He stayed with a friend for 2 nights, convincing himself the stress had finally broken him. When he returned to his apartment, everything looked normal. No shadows out of place, no movement. Relief settled until sunset. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the lights flickered. The shadow poured out from beneath the bedroom door, wider now, thicker, like it had grown while he was gone. It climbed the walls, spreading across the ceiling, blocking the light entirely. Daniel grabbed his phone, dialing emergency services. No signal. The temperature dropped sharply, his breath fogging the air. The shadow detached from the surfaces and stood upright in the center of the room. It was almost human. Almost. Where its face should have been, there was only a deeper void, a hollow that seemed to pull at Daniel's thoughts, memories, fear. "I was born where light was ignored," the voice whispered. "Corners, hallways, the spaces you never look at." Daniel shook his head. "What do you want?" The shadow stepped closer, its edges brushing his skin like cold ash. "To finish forming." Daniel lunged for the lamp and smashed it against the wall. Glass shattered, plunging the room into darkness. He realized too late what he'd done. The shadow surged. It wrapped around him, not crushing, not hurting, merging. Daniel felt it slide into his body, filling spaces he didn't know existed. His thoughts slowed. His heartbeat faded into something distant. He collapsed. Morning light streamed through the windows. Daniel woke on the floor, gasping. Sunlight banished every trace of the shadow. He laughed hysterically, tears streaming down his face. It was over. Or so he thought. Days passed, weeks. Daniel noticed changes. Mirrors reflected him a second too late. His shadow lagged behind his movements. Sometimes when he turned quickly, it faced the wrong direction. At night, he felt taller. He felt stretched, hungry. One evening, as he passed a dark alley, he saw someone pause, staring at the ground in confusion. Their shadow moved first. Daniel smiled.